All right, let's dive right into this explainer. We're going to be looking at some absolutely fascinating parallels between an ancient Hopi oral tradition and a super heavily debated newspaper article from back in 1909. Now, the Grand Canyon is massive, literally bigger than the entire state of Rhode Island, yet it still manages to hold tightly onto a secret that kind of straddles the line between indigenous memory and a historical cold case. We're going to lay out the facts, the historical records, and the actual geological realities to understand exactly why this story just refuses to fade away. So, could an ancient oral tradition and a 1909 newspaper article be describing the exact same underground world? We're kicking things off with this massive question because, honestly, you've got two completely different historical sources pointing to a vast, hidden reality right beneath one of the world's most famous landscapes. On one hand, you have this rich cultural memory passed down for centuries, and on the other, a sensational news report from the early 20th century. How in the world did two vastly different sources end up describing the exact same subterranean setup?
Section 1. The Hopi Underground Tradition.
Long before explorers were mapping out the canyon or archaeologists were surveying its cliffs, the Hopi Bear Clan was already passing down an extraordinary history. To really get this, we have to look at how the Hopi view the world. According to their traditions, the world we're living in right now, it's not the first. They believe earlier worlds ended through great catastrophes, and survivors were actually guided to safety below ground. For the Hopi, the Sipapu isn't just some symbolic heaven. It's a real, physical place connected to the landscape of northern Arizona, where humanity survived those ancient cataclysms. It's the sacred opening marking that transition from the underground world to the one we know today. And what they encountered down there is truly fascinating. According to this deeply held cultural memory, humanity was sheltered beneath the canyon by beings who provided protection and guidance until it was finally safe to pop back up to the surface. The Hopi call them the Ant People. Now, I know that might sound like something straight out of a sci-fi novel, but this is a very real, highly revered oral history. And despite the name, they aren't remembered as just oversized insects. They're described as intelligent beings. Some traditions say they were taller than ordinary people. Others remember them as being covered in hair, but pretty much all of them agree that they lived deep beneath the canyon in these vast underground chambers. And keep in mind, these accounts were strictly preserved through oral tradition, totally independent of modern archaeology. Section 2, the 1909 newspaper discovery. So those ancient Hopi accounts remained completely independent of the archaeological record until the spring of 1909. That's when a shocking newspaper story hit the stands and completely captivated the public because it sounded uncannily familiar. On April 5th of that year, readers of the Arizona Gazette were introduced to the supposedly groundbreaking discoveries of a guy named G.E. Kinkaid, an explorer who claimed he was backed by the government. The headline announced this massive archaeological find hidden high up in the walls of the Grand Canyon, with an entrance so remote you could only reach it by boat along the Colorado River. Just think about the sheer scale and the totally bizarre nature of Kinkaid's claims. Honestly, it reads less like an archaeological report and a lot more like an Indiana Jones script. He described an underground complex that completely defied all known North American archaeological records. We're talking a long central passage stretching over 1,000 feet with dozens of chambers branching off of it. Inside, the expedition supposedly found preserved grain, copper weapons, and beautifully carved objects. But guys, it gets stranger. The article claimed they found mummies that were seated upright rather than laid flat, along with statues and inscriptions resembling Egyptian or Asian artistic styles. That is something completely unheard of in the prehistoric American Southwest. No way, right? Section 3, the search for evidence. To readers back in 1909, this sounded like a discovery that would literally reshape history. But when you look at the timeline of events, things get incredibly murky, incredibly fast. No photographs were ever published, no artifacts ever showed up in museums, and the entire expedition basically just evaporated into thin air. Now, the 1906 Antiquities Act actually perfectly explains why Kinkaid would claim a connection to the Smithsonian and a Professor S.A. Jordan. Because the Grand Canyon was under federal protection, any major discovery would fall under federal oversight, which made a Smithsonian partnership seem highly plausible at the time. Yet after those initial April publications, the first one on the 5th and a highly detailed follow-up on the 9th, the historical trail goes completely 100% cold. When researchers try to investigate this cold case today, they basically hit a brick wall. There are 0 field notes, no museum records. The Smithsonian itself has consistently and firmly stated that they have absolutely no record of Kinkaid, Professor Jordan, or any of those artifacts he described.
And while it's true that late 19th and early 20th century newspapers were definitely known to sometimes publish sensational hoaxes right alongside real news, missing records in archives are also a historical reality. So we're left with this genuine newspaper article, but absolutely no physical proof to back up its wild claims.
Section 4. 2 stories, 1 canyon. Even though that 1909 expedition remains totally unverified, the whole mystery becomes exponentially more gripping when we put these 2 claims side by side. It brilliantly illustrates our core mystery. You have 2 completely distinct sources, separated by time and culture, and they are both describing a remarkably similar subterranean world hidden beneath the exact same landscape. On one hand, you've got the Hopi memory of ancient beings and physical underground chambers, and on the other, the 1909 Gazette detailing hidden passageways and a massive cavern complex. You have to ask yourself, could a 1909 newspaper and an ancient oral tradition actually be pointing toward the exact same physical place? Section 5. An enduring geological mystery. To figure out if a massive underground complex like that is even physically possible, we have to look at the geographical reality of the canyon itself. Millions of visitors look out over the canyon from the rim every single year, but what actually lies beneath those towering cliffs? Well, the Grand Canyon isn't just a big open valley. Its walls actually harbor intricate, completely inaccessible networks of caves that remain entirely unmapped by modern geologists even today. Just the Redwall Limestone Formation alone contains a massive labyrinth of natural caves, hidden ledges, and super narrow passages. A lot of these are completely inaccessible unless you have highly specialized climbing gear or river expedition equipment. So, the sheer geological complexity of the canyon proves that massive, hidden underground spaces aren't just a myth, they are a very real physical feature of the landscape. Which brings us to a really important modern perspective. Back in the year 2000, the Hopi Cultural Preservation Office actually issued a statement regarding sacred places within the canyon. Rather than demanding scientific validation of their oral history, the modern Hopi emphasize the sacred nature of these spaces. They're asking for respect rather than further archaeological intrusion. They aren't trying to validate that old Arizona Gazette story. They are simply asking that the spiritually significant locations within their ancestral home be left in peace. So the crucial point here is that this mystery endures not because we've proven what lies beneath the canyon, but because its vast, unexplored depths guarantee that we really can't definitively answer the question either. Think about it. We have an unverified newspaper report, a categorical denial by the Smithsonian, a landscape absolutely filled with thousands of inaccessible caves, and an indigenous tradition that has survived for centuries longer than the modern state of Arizona. It forces us to ask, do these 2 very different accounts preserve different memories of the exact same place? And ultimately, what, if anything, is still waiting to be found in the deep, dark limestone of the Grand Canyon?